Let's talk about the conference championship games. Unfortunately for me, um, I tried to tell everyone I picked Philly to win this one 27-17. Look, I'm going to keep it real short and simple. Am I disappointed with the loss? Yes. I'm not mad because I expected the Commanders to lose. However,
Mhm.
I am disappointed because I expected a much closer game. We got our butts kicked in that game. Turnovers, penalties, Marshawn Lattimore get into it with AJ Brown. It was the dumb penalty by Sinister hitting Saquon Barkley as soon as Saquon Barkley went out of bounds. Jaden Daniels, to his credit, I thought he played well. It wasn't enough for the Commanders to win, but it really hurts, champ, because to lose in the NFC Championship the way that you did against your arch rival, that stings. It does sting. I mean, it's like you as a Falcons fan losing to the Saints or as the Aints. That stings. And it's going to get me a minute to get over it. But on the good side for Washington, however, is look, we still have Cliff Kingsbury. He ain't going anywhere. You mentioned before with the cap space, 80 was it over $80 million in cap space. So that's enough money for you to acquire you some free agents and get you some pieces in the draft. But champ, the Eagles, the first drive on the first play, Saquon Barkley takes it to the house. And that is demoralizing because on the first play, on the first drive, that's kind of like Michael Vick to Deshaun Jackson 14 years ago on Monday Night Football. The very first play, the very first drive for the Eagles, TD. And it was demoralizing. And for the Commanders fans, look, you kind of expected a loss. Think about it. You're at Philly. They are a complete loaded team. And Commanders fans, why would you put your memorabilia on the Rocky statue, knowing that is a curse? You saw that with the Giants. You saw that with the Niners. You saw that with the Vikings. Why do you think it's acceptable to put your memorabilia on the Rocky statue and thinking you're going to win? You didn't. You didn't just lose, you got beat down. It was embarrassing. Uglier, as you always say, champ, than a masterpiece sneaker.
Exactly.
Uglier than burnt toast. That's how I look at it for the Commanders. But I am ruling out hope, champ. And one of the reasons why I'm still mad with this loss, because I got to deal with dumb, annoying Eagles fans who'll say, see, I told you Washington season was a fluke. They're no match to us. This is what happens when they go up against a team like Philly. And we got to deal with and we had to deal with crazy Eagles fans during that Sunday, especially those Eagles fans that were going ballistic and crazy downtown Philadelphia. I'm quite sure you saw some of the videos and the photos,
Yeah.
man. But that's Philadelphia. But listen, I mean, thank God for Broad Sports and shout out to Broad Sports. Congratulations, well deserving of the victory, man. Hell of a season for you. Wish you nothing but the best in the Super Bowl. I ain't got nothing against Broad, um, Dennis from Stay Tuned, Ignorant Sports Podcast. I got nothing but love and respect for those guys because those guys are real. But them other Eagles fans, oh y'all make me sick. But it was just an embarrassing performance for Washington, Chip. You can't win when you have 4 turnovers. 3 of those turnovers, the Eagles capitalized on touchdowns. Jalen Hurts, give him his due, give him his recognition. He played a great game. A touchdown, touchdown pass, a couple of touchdown runs. Can we please stop criticizing him? Can we please stop saying that he can't play in big moments because he showed you that he can? He's more than capable of doing it. I thought the Eagles defense from Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Nolan Smith, it's going to be tough for the Chiefs on Sunday, and we'll talk about our Super Bowl picks next Friday. But you got to give your hats off to the Eagles. They were just a better team. As for Washington, sad way to end the season. But fortunately for us, we have hope. Cliff Kingsbury is still going to be there. Josh Harris, Magic Johnson still going to be there. Hope that Sam Cosmi recovers from the torn ACL. And look, we have the cap space. And look, focus on Washington for 2025 because keep in mind the Eagles won the division. When is it that a team in that division won it back-to-back years? You got to go back to the early 2000s with the Eagles, with Andy Reid, with Donovan McNabb, when he had Brian Westbrook, the wide receivers, Greg Lewis, James Trash, Todd Pinkston. So I believe Washington's future is going to be fine, considering that Philly's still going to be our team. New York, they got a top 3 pick, and we don't know what they're going to do with the quarterback position. And Jerry, we saw the press conference that you gave about Brian Schottenheimer. Look, I told y'all before, Jerry Jones ain't changing. But Champ, I'm gonna let you go, man. Regarding the NFC Championship game, what were your thoughts?
The Eagles was just a superior team. They were the team that was ready. They were the more mature team. You had a more mature quarterback. You had a running back that was hungry in order to get to his first championship. And, you had a whole bunch of hungry players that just got there last year and was ready to take this team to the next level. And Philadelphia, make sure you send a thank you letter down here to Athens, Georgia, and send that thank you letter down here to Athens, Georgia, to Kirby Smart, and tell them thank you for all that talent that we gave you, courtesy of my Georgia Bulldogs, by the way. You think about Nolan Smith, Jordan Davis, N'Kobe Dean, who's injured, by the way. You think about all those great players on that defensive side of the ball. You think about the Georgia Bulldogs. That's why we keep calling them the Philadelphia Bulldogs or the Georgia Eagles, if you will. So make sure, Eagles fans, make sure y'all send a thank you letter down here to Georgia to Kirby Smart in order to,
They should
thank you.
also thank you.
Yeah.
They got a thank you letter because again, you didn't want Jalen Carter in Atlanta, remember? With all the
No,
issues.
no, I didn't want Jalen. The worst thing that could have probably the best thing that could have happened to Jalen Carter is to go up there. You already to go up there to Philadelphia where you're already around other teammates that are familiar with the city that were with you when you were in college, and you get out of the state of Georgia because of some of the issues that you had. Because there's no telling what may have happened if you would have stayed in Georgia. You going from Athens to Atlanta, you already getting in trouble in a small town. And you know what I said, you know how I feel about if you can't concentrate in a small town, what's going to happen when you go to a even larger town when there's even larger distractions on there. So that's just how I feel about that. But and we came out on top as well. With the addition of Bijan Robinson, we got our guy. But as far as the Eagles are concerned, glad they made it to the Super Bowl. Hopefully they can close up the deal and bring number 2 there. Um, hey, look, Eagles fans, look, don't clown PSP because I'm the one who picked Washington in order to win. I picked Washington in order to win. PSP, he picked Philadelphia, number 1. Number 2, you got to think about this as well. Jaden Daniels is a rookie. And this team in itself mimics its quarterback, and they was making a lot of young mistakes out there. They'd never been to the playoffs. They'd never been to a championship game. So the championship pedigree was on the Philadelphia Eagles side. And, with that team, with all of the fumbles, it's a very, very young team. Not to mention, much like the Dallas Cowboys, y'all had almost a 25-year, 30-year head start on the Washington Commanders
Yeah.
because y'all had Donovan McNabb and Andy Reid to start everything off, and then it just trickled over to Doug Peterson, and then went to Nick Sirianni. Now you got these great draft picks. So y'all had a good head start. Y'all had one hell of an owner, and y'all had a hell of a front office that knew how to draft, and you would manage to put good coaches around. So don't be so harsh on the Commanders fans because this is the first time in years that they've had something. You know, Philadelphia has had something to cheer about for years. Maybe not a championship, but making it to NFC championships and Super Bowls. Arguably, I think they made it more times than any other team in the NFC East.
Mm-hmm.
In the last 25 years, I think they made it to like 3 Super Bowls and 7 NFC championships. So yeah, so that's something to cheer about. Washington fans have not had that in the last 25, 30 years. So give that some food for thought. But I will say this, that defense, stifling. The Philadelphia's defense is stifling. And that defense could go head to head, can be right on par with Kansas City defense, which we will talk about later. They're right on par with them. When you think about Jordan Davis, the big guys up front, they have the pass rushers, they have the back seven, they have everything that you need in order to win a championship. And you have that X factor with Saquon. So I believe that that's going to be a great X factor for them. But as far as the Commanders are concerned, hey, PSP, all the Commanders fans, look, y'all have nothing to be mad or angry about. Y'all was playing on house money the entire year. There was no expectations, especially after Dotson got traded. Remember, Dotson got traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. It was like, we know this is over.
Yeah.
But almost, I mean, came within a couple of games of winning the division. Had a few bad games. In the middle of the season, managed to bounce back. You have a hell of an organization as far as with Magic Johnson and Josh Harris, and you have a lot of great people in that organization as far as Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn is concerned. This is, yeah, I don't think a lot of people's talking about this. A major redemption story for him to be able to make it to the NFC Championship once again without Matt Ryan and my Atlanta Falcons. I think that was a hell of a redemption story to prove that he knew what he was doing. Because although that defense wasn't stifling, it it proved to be great at times, and it was great when it needed to be. And that's a true sign of a head coach knowing what his specialty is, and that's the defensive side of the ball. They was able to force turnovers when they needed to. They was able to put teams on the ropes when they needed to. And if it had not been for all of those fumbles and those penalties on the offensive side of the ball, it would have been a lot better than it was. So big ups to that organization. Like I said, house money all year long. There was nothing to be ashamed of. And look, next year is more than likely going to be even better because this is the third draft under this new regime. This new regime knows what it's doing. You have a coach that has been to a Super Bowl with Dan Quinn, so he knows what it takes and the players that it needs in order to get to a championship. He knows. So there's not anything to be ashamed of, man. I'm gonna just be real with it because that team has a bright future, and I don't see them taking any steps back. I mean, everybody was proven. Dan Quinn was proven right. Cliff Kingsbury was proven right. Not to mention that organization was proven right. So with that, all of that being done, you got to give it up to that organization. Your second year, you won more playoff games than the previous regime did in 22 years.
I'm laughing because again he was reportedly upset with the Commanders' success. And let me just say this: Dan Snyder, you should look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself what you should have done differently as an owner. Because keep in mind, you were the worst. He's not one of; he is the worst. Because the products you gave us on the football field in free agency with Albert Hainsworth. Let's not forget the terrible conditions of the football stadium. And we don't even need to bring in all the other off field mess. I won't do that. We already know. It's obvious. So, Dan Snyder, please, if you're reportedly frustrated, yeah, you should be because you could have done that. You should have done a far better job. But the problem was with you, Dan Snyder, ego. Ego. As you mentioned before, champ, with Magic Johnson, great thing about Magic, as accomplished as he is, he recognizes I'm going to stay out the way. Let the people do the job. I trust them to do the job. Dan Snyder didn't, made horrible decisions. And obviously, the NFL, not just Washington, the NFL is far better without Dan Snyder. That is a fact. That is undeniable.
You know what? When it comes to Dan Snyder, there's only one owner that comes to mind when it comes to being worse, and that was Hugh Culverhouse down there in Tampa Bay before the new owners bought
Oh, I thought you were gonna mention Jim Dolan, but
it.
okay.
But Hugh Culverhouse. I'll say this: with Dan Snyder, you were one of the richest owners in the world in the NFL. Number one, number two, unfortunately for you, by the way, your best friend was Jerry Jones during that time. And the problem is this: sometimes when you get certain friends, you want to be like them. When you can't copy and paste that, sometimes things only work for certain people. I can't put braids in my hair and be PSP. I can't. I can't. Neither can somebody cut their hair all the way off and cut their hair low, put on these hats every other week and say, "Hey, I'm going to be champ." It's not a copy and paste game. And when you think about some of the moves that he's made in free agency, not just in free agency, but with the coaching, he fired Marty Schottenheimer
After an 8-8 season.
after an 8-8 season in which they started 3-8. He won five straight going down the stretch, and that team was on its way. And lo and behold, he got a chance in order to see the turnaround through in San Diego. And you fired him for Steve Spurrier, the run and shoot offense. You bought that to, not to mention what you did when you got there. You essentially had the Florida Gators out there on the field. So, yeah, Dan Snyder, you had more resources than anybody. You were trying to be Jerry Jones, but you lacked the championships, you lacked the cachet, you lacked the know-how, and you lacked the charisma in order to do so. And it just doesn't work for everybody. Jerry could get away with stuff like that because he owns the Dallas Cowboys. Jerry could get away with stuff like that because, hey, people are hoping for one day the big turnaround to happen. Plus, for all of the criticism that we give Jerry, Jerry has actually put good product out on the field. He's drafted DeMarcus Ware. Uh He's drafted a lot of great players. He's drafted Mika Parsons. He's drafted Dak Prescott. He's drafted Ezekiel Elliott. He's drafted some of the best wide receivers that money could buy. He's drafted great offensive line. So, and when it came time to sign guys and free agents, it wasn't a bust in free agents. Granted, it's been a while since they made that big splash in free agency. But the thing is, he had the rap sheet in order to do the things that he was doing. As far as, with the charisma being on and off the field. Dan Snyder, you didn't have that rap sheet. Those Super Bowls that the Washington Commanders have, they were won over legendary only Jack Kent Cook,
Yes.
Mr. Cook. They wasn't won under you. So you don't have to cachet the Super Bowl background or the repertoire with coaches in order for you to be a Jerry Jones. So that is the reason why that failed. You failed because, and not to mention some of the other stuff off the field, which is flat out disgusting if you want me to be honest with you. And
Deplorable.
yes, and that's being kind. So when you think about all of that and you put that into perspective, in the great words of a great man who raised me, take that boot off of your foot, bend over and kick your own self in the buttocks, because guess what? You have no one to blame but yourself, Mr. Snyder. So take that money that you just made, go ahead and go on about your business, because guess what? You are not welcome either in Washington or Andover anymore, especially after how it ended. It was so bad that they took the FedEx logo off of the field.
They did.
They took the FedEx logo off of the field. And you really have to ask yourself, like, why was it done sooner? Because you heard about it for years. And out of all 22 years that you own the team, two playoff games, one win. This new regime has been in charge 2 short years, and has went to an NFC championship and eclipsed exactly what you have done. So that just goes to show you the ineptitude of you.
Thank you. And I think with Washington, look, there's nowhere to go but up because Josh Harris, Magic Johnson, as you mentioned, champ, anything that Magic touches will turn to gold because I just trust him and his input. And I know Magic from a champion standpoint, he's upset, very rightfully so, disappointed with the loss, but he's going to use that as fuel for next season as well as the rest of the players. Um, which players would you like to see from the Commanders? Because Myles Garrett wants out of Cleveland and he is beloved in Cleveland. Very good player. I would love to have a Myles Garrett on my team. I don't know if we have enough money to afford him, however, although it would be a bit eccentric for him to go to Washington because, again, he's from Texas. And before the draft, he said he wanted the Dallas Cowboys to draft them. But hey, if Myles Garrett wants to win and put himself in the best position possible, hey, we wouldn't mind him going to Washington. And we definitely need some help with the DBs. We need a cornerback in the draft to pair up with Marshawn Lattimore. A couple of years ago, I said I wanted Christian Gonzalez out of
Mhm.
Oregon. And unfortunately, we didn't do that and drafted Emmanuel Forbes, who we had to let go. So now with this draft, you better get yourself a corner, a physical one, because you got to deal with 3 stud receivers in that division. A.J. Brown of the Eagles, C.D. Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys, and Malik Neighbors of the New York Giants. Then you got to address the run. Washington, like I said, 30th in the NFL in stopping the run. You can't win games when you're giving up too many rushing yards, especially with a guy like a Saquon, which is why it was no surprise that the Eagles, they were going to run all over the Commanders. So I think for the Commanders, they need to get some run stoppers. And of course, as you mentioned, some hogs to protect your most valuable investment in Jaden Daniels. So what do you think they should get, champ?
There's a receiver in New York by the name of Devontae Adams. Put him on the other side of Scary Terry. Put him on the other side of Scary Terry.
Do you think he's going to be okay being the number 2 or number 2 because Terry wants to be the number 1?
I mean, when you want to win, you got to put. When you want, there's a price to pay for everything.
I know
Do
that.
you do you want to win? Because guess what? You was number 1 this year. Did you win? You was number 1 last year. Did you win? You was number 1 the year before. Did you win? You was number 4 win the year before that. Did you win? So it might be time for you to take a step back in order for you to win for the greater good. Because guess what? With you on one side and Scary Terry on the other side, they can't double team either of you. So both of y'all are gonna get y'all chance to have the ball. So I would take a long look at either Devontae Adams or see what the New York Jets want to do with Garrett Wilson, just to see. I would not.
I wouldn't mind Garrett Wilson because Aaron Rodgers would have a lot to say about Devontae coming to stay in New York.
Yeah. Uh I would have one thing I would recommend is get some hogs in the draft. One thing I will say though is be careful about the Myles Garrett thing because that's gonna cost you a lot as far as money wise and draft picks because they're not. If I'm them,
I don't see it. I wouldn't
I'm not
mind it,
letting
but I
him.
don't see it.
I'm not letting him go for anything less than 2 first rounders. I'm just being real. But I wouldn't mind seeing Devontae Adams or Garrett Wilson in the draft. Y'all need some more. I don't know if y'all gonna re-sign Austin Eckler or either of those running backs that you have right now. But
Hey,
Ollie
get
Gordon,
Cam Scatterboo.
yes, I was just about to say that. Cam Scatterboo and Ollie Gordon, Amarion Hampton from North Carolina. A lot of those guys are going to be available. So, I mean, those guys are hard nosed. They can get the job done. And I think that'll be a good thing for that organization. But the first thing is first, get you some hogs. Get you some hogs in order to protect that quarterback. Because look, ain't nothing like how we used to say it back in the day. Ain't nothing like when your quarterback can lead a game in that jersey and go straight to the club because ain't no dirt on it. When your quarterback can lead that game with a clean jersey and go right to the club, that is a good day for the team. So get you some hogs in there so you can a quarterback can go home with a clean jersey every single game. Now it ain't gonna be like that every single game because of course you got to deal with the Philadelphia Eagles twice a year. As long as Micah Parsons is in
Micah.
Dallas, Micah, excuse me, I can never say his name right. As long as Micah Parsons is in Dallas, he gonna get his. But get you some guys who can contain those guys, so your quarterback doesn't have to run.
Exactly.
Because he doesn't. He had, although Jada Daniels, he's a big guy. I think he's like 6'4", like 205, 210 pounds.
He a big
But
guy by height, but skinny.
yeah, but he needs to put on a little bit of weight. Just a little bit, not too much, but a little bit of some of that football weight. But yeah, I think that I think the main thing it would be to focus on, especially in the draft and in free agency, is some hogs. See if you can get a Devontae Adams or Garrett Wilson to go along with Scary Terry. Get you some. Make sure you got the weapons, and serie up the defense. See who's available to defense. But main priority for me, if I'm the owner, hey, I need to get somebody to protect this quarterback because I don't want my quarterback being out every other year, like Andrew Luck and or as quiet as it's kept, Joe Burrow, because it's just like every time he gets hit, you kind of cringe because it's like, is this going to be the hit that takes him out for the season? So get you some hogs, get you a Garrett Wilson or either a Devontae Adams. Try to sure you up the defense as much as you can in the draft and see where you go from there. But the main priority should be them hogs and them receivers.
I also think linebackers too, because we need some linebackers to stop the run too, because it can't just be the D line. We also need some linebackers that can help us out. And if Bobby Wagner can still stay, who knows? There may be a possibility he could go to Vegas to reunite with Pete Carroll. But if he stays in Washington, you're familiar with Dan Quinn because, again, the Legion of Boom, he was the former defensive coordinator there. And if we do decide to draft a linebacker, what better way to learn from one of the best, the all-time greats in Bobby Wagner? And with Marshawn Lattimore, look, he wasn't healthy most of the season, but we need a corner champ. We got to get ourselves a corner. I would like for Marshawn, just like Bobby, to help mentor, help him learn, but we got to get a corner because we could have drafted Christian Gonzalez. He ended up going to New England, and you saw the season that he had going up against Jamar Chase, going up against some of the better wide receivers in the NFL. Once again, validating why I wanted to get him. You got to get yourself a corner to deal with those types of wide receivers, especially with the Eagles with not just AJ, but also Devontae.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think the future's bright, though.
Yes, I do. I agree. I don't know. I don't know which corner in particular that would fit y'all's scheme because he's trying to. It looks like he's trying to either rebuild a Legion of Boom or rebuild what he had in Atlanta for those 2 short years that we was on top. But it's going to be interesting to see what he can get in the draft. But need some corners. See if you can re-sign Jonathan Allen too while you at it. See if you can re-sign
I
Jonathan
think
Allen.
I think he'll be happy because now with the new ownership and finally getting to an NFC Championship game, Jonathan Allen's probably thinking, okay, I kind of like it what I'm seeing with Washington. I've been around this organization. I just completed my 8th year here. Okay. I dealt with the first 7 years with Dan Snyder. All right. Now I'm in a different now I'm in a different ownership now. Let's see how it goes. But he made a deep playoff run. He might be happy. He's definitely upset with the loss, as well as a lot of other commanders. So let's focus and head on to next year. And plus, there may be a possibility they could win the division. So I just hope that we continue to. I just hope the future is bright. I know the future is bright
Yes.
because there's nowhere to go but up. And of course, the things that you mentioned, over $80 million in cap space, new ownership, new coaching. So I hope it pans out.